A bustling hospital where sterile halls hum with life's raw edges. Here, Marianne Harper, a cleaner with a radiant spirit, pours her strength into caring for her ailing mother, her dreams buried under endless shifts. When exhaustion claims her, Dr. Tristan Langley, a compassionate physician with a golden heart, steps in, seeing beyond her worn sweater to the light within. Their journey unfolds through tender care, a rainy kiss, and mysterious gifts that nudge Marianne toward her forgotten aspirations. From doubt to courage, their love proves that empathy, not status, builds bridges. What sparks fly when worlds collide? Will a single act of kindness rewrite their stars? Rate this story 0-10 in the comments, share what stirs you, and stay until the end. Secrets await under the rain. Chapter 1. Shadows of the Night. The hospital exhaled a sterile sigh, its corridors steeped in the sharp tang of antiseptic and the restless flicker of fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped moths. At 3 a.m., the emergency room was a quiet storm. Gurneys glided with soft squeaks, monitors hummed their steady hymns, and nurses traded clipped whispers over charts. Marianne Harper, 26, moved through this muted chaos like a wraith, her long black hair a dark cascade that shimmered faintly under the cold glow. Her alabaster skin, stretched taut over high cheekbones, framed hazel eyes that held a quiet fire, though tonight they were dulled by a bone-deep exhaustion that clung to her like damp fog. Clad in an oversized sweater, its sleeves frayed and cuffs unraveling, she gripped a mop, her chapped hands tracing slow, deliberate arcs across the linoleum. Each stroke was a silent prayer, a plea to keep the world from crumbling, rent paid, lights on. Her mother, Clara, still breathing. Marianne's life was a tightrope stretched over an abyss. By day, she scrubbed the hospital's endless floors, the rhythm of her mop a metronome to her survival. By night, she sat by Clara's bedside in their cramped apartment, counting out arthritis pills and heart medication with trembling precision. Clara's frail frame, once robust with laughter, now seemed to fade into the sagging armchair, her breaths shallow, her hands knotted with pain. The cost of those pills, more than Marianne's weekly pay, left no room for luxuries like new sneakers or a moment's rest. Her own hunger was a familiar ache, one she'd learned to silence, her thin frame hidden beneath the sweater's bulk. She wore it not for warmth, but to shroud the sharp jut of her collarbones, the way her wrists seemed too fragile for the weight they carried. Yet, in the hospital's pediatric ward, Marianne transformed. In stolen moments between shifts, she'd slip into that softer world, where the air smelled of crayons and hope. Her laughter, bright and unguarded, danced with the children as she crafted paper stars, their edges crisp despite her weary fingers. "Another star, Mary!" a boy with a shaved head would beg, and she'd oblige, her hazel eyes sparkling as she spun tales of constellations. To them, she was a fairy, weaving magic from scraps. To herself, she was merely enduring, pouring what little she had into others, because it was the only way to keep her own light from fading. Across the ER, in a quiet corner by the nurse's station, Dr. Tristan Langley, 31, stood over a patient's chart, his pen scratching notes in precise, controlled strokes. His golden blonde hair, neatly swept back, caught the light, and his blue eyes, sharp with focus, softened with a warmth that set patients at ease. His white coat bore his name in crisp embroidery, a badge of his role as a physician, but it didn't tell the full story. Tristan was more than a doctor. He was a co-founder of MedBright, a medical tech startup that had revolutionized affordable care, turning him into a millionaire before he'd turned 30. Wealth hadn't hardened him, though. If anything, it had deepened his resolve to bridge the gap between the hospital's sterile efficiency and the raw, human need he saw daily. Families like the ones he'd grown up with, scraping by in a world that offered little mercy. Tristan had noticed Marianne weeks ago, though he'd never admit how often his gaze sought her out. It wasn't just her ethereal beauty, though that was undeniable. The way her dark hair caught the light, the graceful curve of her neck as she bent over her mop. It was her presence, the way she moved through the hospital's chaos with a quiet strength, like a candle burning steady in a gale. He'd seen her with Clara during a checkup, Marianne's hand steadying her mother's frail frame, her voice soft as she murmured reassurances. He'd watched her in the pediatric ward, her laughter coaxing smiles from children who hadn't smiled in days, her paper stars, a constellation of hope in their small hands. Each moment was a thread, weaving a picture of a woman who gave more than she had, who loved fiercely despite her own scarcity. He wanted to know her, to ask her name beyond the badge clipped to her sweater, but the thought struck him in quiet moments and left him frozen. In medical school, he'd been the reserved one, the boy from a modest family who'd clawed his way to success through grit and sleepless nights. Approaching Marianne felt like crossing a chasm. Her reserved demeanor, the way she seemed to shrink from attention, made him fear he'd intrude, that he'd be just another voice demanding something she couldn't give. Marianne, oblivious to Tristan's gaze, paused to lean against her cart, her breath catching in a shallow, stubborn cough that had lingered for weeks. She pressed a hand to her chest, willing it away. It was nothing, she told herself, just fatigue, just the damp chill of the hospital air. But the dizziness that followed, a slow tilt of the world, was harder to dismiss. She gripped the mop tighter, her knuckles whitening. She couldn't afford to be sick, not with Clara's next prescription due, not with the landlord's curt note taped to their door. The hospital was her lifeline, both her prison and her purpose. To falter now would be to let everything, Clara, the apartment, her fragile dreams, slip through her fingers. Tristan's eyes narrowed as he caught the moment, her pause, the way she steadied herself, the faint wheeze in her breath. He'd seen enough patience to recognize the signs: pallor, fatigue, the subtle sway of someone pushing past their limits. Concern flared, sharp and insistent, a tug in his chest he couldn't ignore. He took a step toward her, then stopped, his hand hovering over the chart. What could he say? "You look unwell." It felt patronizing, invasive. Yet the thought of doing nothing gnawed at him. He scribbled a note to check the cleaning staff's schedules, a pretext to learn more about her, to find a way to help without overstepping. His pen stilled, his gaze lingering on her silhouette at the far end of the hall, her mop moving in rhythmic sweeps, a quiet defiance against the weight she carried. Marianne straightened, forcing a deep breath. She had to keep moving. The pediatric ward was next, and she'd promised little Emma a new paper star, one with silver edges to match her favorite bracelet. As she pushed her cart down the hall, her cough returned, sharper this time, a blade in her chest. She ignored it, just as she ignored the ache in her legs, the hollow pang in her stomach. She was Marianne Harper, the girl who kept going, who carried her mother's hopes and her own buried dreams in the quiet spaces of her heart. The hospital hummed around her, indifferent to the small drama unfolding in its shadows, its lights flickering like stars, too distant to guide her. Chapter 2. A Fall in the Dark. The hospital's restless hum pulsed on, its corridors a labyrinth of antiseptic and shadow. Marianne Harper pushed her cleaning cart through the ER's dim maze, the fluorescent lights casting stark pools across her pale face. Her long black hair, once a flowing veil, was now tied back in a messy knot, damp with sweat despite the chill. The cough that had plagued her for weeks had sharpened, each spasm a fist tightening around her chest. She ignored it, as she ignored the dizziness that blurred the edges of her vision. The pediatric ward awaited, where little Emma expected her silver-edged paper star, and Marianne clung to that promise like a lifeline. Clara's next prescription loomed, and the landlord's note burned in her mind. Rent was due, no excuses. She couldn't falter, not now, not when every swipe of her mop kept their fragile world intact. Her hands trembled as she wrung out the mop, the motion mechanical, her thoughts drifting to Emma's gap-toothed grin. The thought brought a fleeting smile, but it shattered as another cough tore through her, forcing her to lean against the cart. She pressed a hand to her forehead, willing the world to steady. Just one more hour, she told herself. One more hour, and she could collapse in the break room, steal a moment to breathe. Her oversized sweater clung to her thin frame, its frayed sleeves a shield against the hospital's cold and her own frailty. Hunger gnawed, but she pushed it down, her focus on the floor, the rhythm of cleaning, the need to keep moving. Across the ER, Dr. Tristan Langley stood at the nurse's station, his blonde hair glinting under the lights as he reviewed a patient's chart. The night was a storm. Fractured bones, spiking fevers, lives teetering, but his thoughts kept drifting to Marianne. He'd seen her earlier, her sway against the wall, the wheeze in her breath, and his scribbled note to check her schedule hadn't quelled the worry gnawing at him. Her quiet strength, her care for Clara, her laughter with the children, had captivated him. But so had the signs he couldn't ignore: pallor, fatigue, that stubborn cough. Pneumonia, perhaps, worsened by neglect. Approaching her mid-shift felt like crossing a line, yet his vow to help burned in his chest, a resolve born under the flickering lights the night before. Marianne mopped a quiet stretch near the triage area, the linoleum gleaming under her steady strokes. The dizziness surged again, a tidal wave that drowned her senses. Her vision blurred, the walls tilting, and her knees buckled. The mop slipped from her grasp, clattering against the floor with a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the hushed hall. She reached for the wall, but her fingers found only air, and she crumpled, her body folding into itself, her hair spilling across the tiles like spilled ink. Darkness swallowed her, the hospital's hum fading to a distant drone. Tristan's head snapped up at the noise, his pulse spiking. He dropped the chart, its pages fluttering, and sprinted down the hall, his white coat flaring behind him. "Marianne!" His voice cut through the quiet, sharp with fear, as he saw her crumpled form, her pale skin stark against the dark cascade of her hair. He knelt beside her, his hands swift but gentle, checking her pulse, her breathing. Her skin was clammy, her breath shallow, each inhale laced with a faint wheeze that confirmed his fears. "Stay with me," he murmured, scooping her into his arms. She was alarmingly light, her frame fragile beneath the sweater, and the weight of her vulnerability struck him like a blow. He carried her to an empty exam room, barking orders to a nurse who trailed behind. "IV fluids, stat, prep antibiotics, and a chest x-ray." The nurse nodded, rushing to comply, while Tristan laid Marianne on the bed, his hands steady despite the storm in his chest. He hooked her to a monitor, the green line of her heartbeat a fragile reassurance. Her cough, her exhaustion. It wasn't just fatigue. Pneumonia, he suspected, its shadow deepened by overwork and neglect. He started an IV, his fingers deft as he inserted the line, his mind racing with questions he couldn't ask a woman who lay unconscious, her face serene yet haunted, even in sleep. Through the night, Tristan stayed by her side, adjusting drips, checking vitals, his blue eyes tracing her features, the delicate arch of her brow, the faint freckles dusting her nose. The hospital's chaos faded, the world narrowing to this small room, this woman whose strength had drawn him in. He thought of her with Clara, her soft reassurances during checkups, and her laughter in the pediatric ward, coaxing joy from children who knew too much pain. She was more than a cleaner, more than a stranger, a flame flickering against impossible odds, and he wouldn't let it go out. He adjusted her blanket, a small gesture, but one that felt like a vow. Dawn crept through the blinds, painting the room in soft gold. Marianne stirred, her eyelids fluttering as awareness returned. Pain lingered in her chest, duller now, but panic surged as she registered the IV line, the sterile bed. Clara, her job. Her absence would cost them everything. She reached for the IV, fumbling to pull it free, her voice a hoarse rasp. "I have to work. Clara needs me. I can't stay here." Tristan, seated by her bed, caught her hand, his touch warm and firm. "Marianne, stop. You're not going anywhere." His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear, a plea she didn't yet understand. "You collapsed. You're sick. Pneumonia, likely. You need rest, not a mop." He leaned closer, his blonde hair falling slightly over his forehead, his presence a quiet anchor in her storm. Marianne blinked, her mind sluggish, her gaze locking with his. The warmth of his hand, the urgency in his voice, stirred something unfamiliar. Confusion, gratitude, a spark she couldn't name. "Why?" she whispered, the word raw, unguarded. "Why does it matter to you?" Her hazel eyes searched his, seeking an answer she wasn't sure she could bear. Tristan hesitated, his thumb brushing her knuckles, a gesture so small it stole her breath. "Because I've seen you," he said softly, his voice low, earnest. "And I can't look away." The air between them thickened, charged with something neither could define. A nurse knocked, breaking the spell, her arms full of supplies. Tristan released her hand, his professional mask slipping into place, but his eyes lingered on Marianne, a silent promise that this moment, this care, was only the beginning. The hospital hummed beyond the door, indifferent to the fragile thread forming within. Marianne clutched the blanket, her heart unsteady, not from illness, but from the weight of being seen. Tristan stood, his silhouette framed by the dawn, knowing this night had changed something irrevocable. For her, for him, for the path they'd yet to walk. Chapter 3. Sparks in the Silence. The hospital's sterile hum lingered in Marianne Harper's ears as she lay in the exam room, the dawn's golden light softening the harsh edges of the sterile bed. Her chest ached, dulled by the IV drip, but her heart raced with the echo of Dr. Tristan Langley's words. "I have seen you, and I can't look away." His touch, the warmth of his hand steadying hers, had sparked something fragile, a flicker of connection that terrified her as much as it intrigued her. The monitor's steady beep anchored her to the present, but her mind spun with panic. Clara's pills, the unpaid rent, her cleaning shift, her collapse had jeopardized a storm she couldn't afford. Yet Tristan's blue eyes, earnest and unwavering, held her in a way she hadn't felt since her father's death years ago, leaving her and Clara to fend for themselves. "Why does it matter to you?" Marianne had asked, her voice barely a rasp, her hazel eyes searching his for a truth she wasn't ready to grasp. Tristan's hesitation, the gentle brush of his thumb against her knuckles, had thickened the air between them. The nurse's knock had shattered the moment, and now as Tristan stepped back, his professional mask in place, Marianne felt the weight of his gaze linger. "You need to eat," he said, his voice steady but soft, as if coaxing a skittish creature. "I'll be back." He left the room, his white coat a flash of white in the doorway, and Marianne clutched the blanket, her heart a tangle of gratitude and doubt. She was just a cleaner, a shadow in the hospital's bustle. Why had he stayed through the night, his presence a quiet vigil? Tristan returned minutes later, a bowl of warm oatmeal in his hands, the steam curling in the morning light. "Eat," he urged, handing it to her, their fingers brushing in a fleeting spark that made her breath catch. She took a tentative bite, the simple act grounding her, and their eyes met again, a silent question hanging between them. "Why do you care?" she asked again, bolder now, her voice steadier despite the ache in her chest. "I'm just the cleaner, nobody." Tristan's smile was soft, unguarded, a crack in his polished demeanor. "Nobody?" Marianne, I've seen you with your mother, reading to her when you're half dead on your feet. I've seen you with the kids in the pediatric ward, making them laugh like you're not carrying the world." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his voice low and earnest. "I've wanted to talk to you for weeks. I just didn't know how." He paused, a faint flush creeping up his neck. "You're not invisible to me." Marianne's cheeks warmed, her heart stuttering. His words were a lifeline, but they also terrified her. No one had seen her like that, not since her father's stories filled their old house with warmth. "I noticed you too," she admitted, her voice barely audible, her gaze dropping to the oatmeal. "The way you talk to patients like they're people, not cases. But I'm not someone you should waste time on." "You're not a waste of time," Tristan said, his voice firm, his blue eyes locking with hers. "You're the opposite." The air thickened, charged with something neither could name. A possibility, a spark. The hospital's hum faded, the world narrowing to this small room, this moment. A nurse knocked again, her clipboard a sharp reminder of reality, and Tristan stood, his professional mask slipping back on. "Rest," he said, his tone gentle but insistent. "I'll check on you later." He left, the door clicking shut, and Marianne clutched the bowl, the oatmeal's warmth a faint echo of his presence. Was this care or something more? She didn't know, but the spark lingered, a quiet flame in her chest. Days later, Marianne was back on her feet, her cough softened by antibiotics, but her life unchanged. She scrubbed floors with renewed fervor, dodging the ER to avoid Tristan's shifts. Clara's bills loomed, and the hospital was her lifeline, her prison. Yet the memory of his words, his oatmeal, haunted her. She slipped into the break room one evening, her hands still raw from cleaning, and found a crumpled hospital newsletter on the table. The headline blazed, "Dr. Tristan Langley, MedBright co-founder, redefines healthcare." A glossy photo showed him, his blonde hair catching the light, his smile confident yet warm. The article detailed his startup's millions, his awards, his vision for affordable care. A millionaire, a visionary, a man whose world sparkled with possibility, while hers was a dim maze of mops and overdue rent. Her stomach twisted, the oatmeal's memory souring. She was a cleaner, scraping by in a borrowed sweater, her dreams of accounting buried under Clara's illness. Tristan's care, his lingering glances, were they pity? A fleeting kindness for a struggling soul? The realization crushed her. She folded the newsletter, shoving it into her locker, and resolved to bury the spark between them. She couldn't afford to dream of a man like Tristan, not when her life was a fragile stack of bills and responsibilities. At her next shift, she took longer routes, avoiding the ER's bright chaos. Follow-up appointments became a game of evasion. She scheduled them on his days off, claiming conflicts when the nurse pressed. Her cough lingered, a stubborn shadow, but she swallowed it with cheap syrup, telling herself it was enough. Tristan felt her absence like a bruise. The pediatric ward, once alive with her laughter, was quieter now, the children asking for Mari with puzzled frowns. He'd catch glimpses of her cart in distant halls, her dark hair vanishing around corners, but she was a ghost, slipping through his fingers. The memory of their exam room conversation, her shy admission, the warmth of her hand, haunted him. Had he misread her, pushed too far? His days grew heavier, his smiles to patients a little less steady. He checked her chart, noting her missed appointments, worry gnawing at him. Pneumonia didn't vanish on willpower alone. Determined to reach her without intruding, he left a small package at her doorstep, a bottle of high-quality multivitamins nestled in tissue paper with a note, "For your strength, from a friend." No signature, no pressure, just a quiet gesture to show he hadn't forgotten. Marianne found the vitamins that night, her fingers tracing the elegant script. Her heart fluttered, Tristan? The thought warmed her, but doubt crept in. Why would he bother? She tucked the package away, her resolve hardening. The hospital loomed around her, its lights a cold reminder of the chasm between them. Yet, as she mopped the pediatric ward, folding a paper star for Emma, the spark from that dawn-lit room refused to fade. It flickered, fragile but persistent. A question she wasn't ready to answer. A hope she wasn't ready to claim. Chapter 4. A Kiss in the Rain. The hospital's sterile pulse beat on, but Marianne Harper felt its rhythm like a cage. Her cough, though dulled by syrup, lingered as she scrubbed floors, her long black hair tied back, her hazel eyes shadowed by the weight of avoidance. The vitamins, left anonymously at her doorstep with their cryptic note, sat untouched on her kitchen counter, a silent challenge she couldn't face. She knew, deep in her bones, that they were from Dr. Tristan Langley, the man whose oatmeal and earnest words had kindled a spark she'd tried to smother. The newsletter's glossy truth, his millionaire status, had driven a wedge between them. Her life of mops and Clara's bills too small for his world of MedBright's millions. She dodged his shifts, skirted the ER, and ignored follow-up appointments, convincing herself it was for the best. Yet, each glimpse of his white coat in a distant hall tugged at her. The memory of his touch in that dawn-lit exam room, a flame she couldn't fully douse. Days later, another gift appeared under her apartment door. A flyer for a scholarship program offering night classes in accounting, her old dream that had rusted under Clara's illness. A single line accompanied it in the same elegant script. For your dreams. Marianne's breath caught, her fingers trembling as she traced the words. Accounting. Numbers had once been her refuge, their logic a balm against chaos. But now, she was a cleaner, not a student, her life too tangled for such hopes. Doubt roared. She'd fail, prove she was nothing. Yet the flyer, like the vitamins, whispered of someone's faith in her. Someone who saw more than her frayed sweater. She tucked it into her purse, unresolved, and threw herself into work, mopping with a fervor that drowned her thoughts. Tristan, meanwhile, felt her absence like a wound. The pediatric ward's quiet was a stark contrast to Marianne's laughter, the children's questions about Mari, a knife in his chest. He'd orchestrated the gifts through discreet channels, hoping to nudge her toward possibility without scaring her. Her missed appointments gnawed at him. Pneumonia's shadow could linger, and her health mattered more than his pride. His days, once brightened by her presence, grew heavy, his focus fraying as he scanned halls for her dark hair. The exam room moment, her shy admission, the warmth of her hand, replayed in his mind, a beacon in his doubt. Had he pushed too far? He worked longer hours, pouring himself into MedBright's mission, but his heart strayed to Marianne, her resilience a mirror to his own quiet battles. One rainy evening, as Tristan left the hospital, umbrella in hand, he froze. Across the street, Marianne stood under the downpour, her thin sweater soaked as she shielded her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Ellis, from the rain. Mrs. Ellis clutched a sagging grocery bag, her frail frame bent, and Marianne, laughing softly, tucked her body closer, letting the rain drench her to keep the older woman dry. The sight pierced Tristan, her selflessness, her quiet strength, unchanged despite her distance. His heart, already raw, couldn't bear it. He crossed the street, rain slapping his face, his umbrella forgotten, his coat heavy with water. "Marianne!" His voice cut through the storm, sharp with frustration and something deeper, something desperate. She turned, her hazel eyes wide, rain plastering her hair to her cheeks. Mrs. Ellis glanced between them, sensing the tension, and murmured about waiting under a nearby awning, hobbling away. Marianne hesitated, then faced Tristan, her posture braced as if expecting a blow. The rain roared, a curtain blurring the world, the streetlights casting their faces in soft, wavering light. "Why are you avoiding me?" Tristan demanded, stepping closer, water dripping from his blonde hair. "You miss appointments. You dodge me in the halls. What did I do?" His voice cracked, betraying the hurt he'd buried, his blue eyes searching hers with a raw intensity. Marianne's lips parted, but words faltered. The rain soaked her sweater, chilling her skin, but his presence burned. "It's not you," she whispered, her voice nearly lost in the storm. "It's me. I read about you, your company, your life. You're everything, a millionaire, a visionary. And I'm nothing, a cleaner, a nobody." Her gaze dropped, shame tightening her throat, the newsletter's weight heavier than the rain. Tristan's eyes blazed, not with anger, but with something fiercer, a conviction that shook her. "Nothing. Marianne, you're the woman who lights up a ward, who gives everything to others." He stepped closer, rain mingling with the urgency in his voice. "You think I care about status? I see you. Your heart, your strength." Emotion choked him, and before he could stop himself, he cupped her face, his hands warm against her cold skin, and kissed her. The kiss was desperate, sweet, a collision of longing and truth under the storm's relentless drum. Marianne froze, the rain a cold shock, then melted, her hands clutching his coat as the world dissolved. For a moment, there was only them. Rain, warmth, the heartbeat of something real. She pulled back, trembling, tears mixing with rain, her voice raw. "I love you," she confessed, the words spilling like a dam breaking. "But I don't belong in your world. I never will." Tristan gripped her hands, his gaze unwavering, rain streaming down his face. "My world is wherever you are. Love isn't titles or money. It's this." He pressed her hand to his chest, where his heart pounded, a steady rhythm against the storm. "Don't run from me, please." His voice was a plea, his eyes holding hers, willing her to believe. Marianne's breath hitched, his words a lifeline she wanted to grasp but feared would slip. The rain slowed, a soft drizzle now, and Mrs. Ellis's cough from the awning broke the spell. Marianne stepped back, her eyes locked on Tristan's, a storm of doubt and hope swirling within her. "I need time," she murmured, her voice barely audible, turning to help Mrs. Ellis, her soaked sweater heavy with more than rain. She guided the older woman home, her steps unsteady, the kiss a burning brand on her lips, her confession, "I love you," echoing like a pulse. Tristan watched her go, his heart a tangle of ache and resolve. The hospital loomed behind him, its lights a cold reminder of the distance she'd built. But her words, her love, were a spark he wouldn't let die. He stood in the rain, his coat drenched, knowing he'd wait, fight, prove that love could bridge any chasm. The street grew quiet, the drizzle a soft whisper, and he turned back to the hospital, his vow as steady as the heartbeat he'd felt under her hand. Chapter 5. Steps Toward Light. The rain's echo lingered in Marianne Harper's mind, as did the press of Tristan Langley's lips, his desperate kiss a brand on her heart. Her confession, "I love you," hung like a fragile thread, stretched taut by her doubts as she'd fled that stormy street, her soaked sweater heavy, Mrs. Ellis's chatter a blur. Back in her cramped apartment, Marianne sat by Clara's bedside, the hum of the oxygen machine a steady rhythm, her mother's frail hand warm in hers. Tristan's words, "My world is wherever you are," clashed with the hospital newsletter's truth. A millionaire, a visionary, worlds apart from her life of mops and overdue bills. She was a cleaner, her dreams of accounting rusted under years of sacrifice. Yet the memory of his warmth, his belief, refused to fade, a spark that flickered in the quiet of her sleepless nights. Marianne threw herself into work, scrubbing floors with a fervor that drowned her thoughts. She dodged Tristan's shifts, her lingering cough a dull ache masked with syrup. The pediatric ward felt emptier without her visits. But she couldn't face the children's questions or risk meeting Tristan's blue eyes. Her heart ached, not just for him, but for the woman she might have been, the one who dared to dream before Clara's illness stole her future. Yet, small mysteries pierced her defenses. The vitamins on her counter, the scholarship flyer in her purse, unsigned but unmistakably his, whispered of a faith she couldn't ignore. One night, alone at her kitchen table, the flyer lay open, its deadline 2 days away. Her laptop glowed, the application half-filled, her cursor blinking like a challenge. She'd started college once, years ago, before Clara's diagnosis forced her to drop out. Numbers had been her refuge, their order a shield against chaos. But failure loomed. What if she couldn't keep up? What if she proved the world right, that she was just a cleaner? Yet Tristan's voice echoed. "You're the opposite." Her fingers hovered, then typed, haltingly at first, then with resolve. She wrote of Clara, her sacrifices, her buried dreams. In the motivation field, she typed, "Because someone believes I'm enough," and hit submit, her heart pounding with terror and hope. The next day, Tristan found her in a quiet hallway, restocking her cart. He'd hesitated, but her pale face, the faint wheeze in her breath, spurred him forward. "Marianne," he said softly, his white coat crisp but his eyes gentle. She stiffened, her hands tightening on a bottle of cleaner, but didn't flee. "I'm worried about you. You're still not well." His voice was low, careful, as if approaching a wounded bird. "I'm fine," she said, her tone clipped, but her hazel eyes betrayed vulnerability. "I can't afford to stop." Tristan stepped closer, mindful not to crowd her. "You don't have to do this alone. I meant what I said, your health, your future, it matters." He paused, searching her face. "I heard you applied for a scholarship. That's incredible." His smile was shy, proud, a crack in his composed facade. Marianne's eyes widened, a flush creeping up her cheeks. "How did you—" She stopped, realization dawning. "The vitamins, the flyer. That was you." Her voice was soft, almost accusing but laced with wonder. He nodded, his gaze steady. "I wanted you to see what I see. You're not just a cleaner, Marianne. You're capable of so much more." His words were a quiet fire, warming the cold space between them. Her throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "What if I fail?" "Then you try again," he said, his tone unwavering. "And I'll be here, cheering you on." He hesitated, then added, "I'd like you to join our outreach program at MedBright. Not as a favor, but because you understand people, their struggles, their hopes. You could make a difference." Marianne blinked, the offer overwhelming. "Work with Tristan?" Her doubts roared, but so did the spark of possibility. I'll think about it," she said, her voice soft but not dismissive. The hallway hummed around them, indifferent to the shift unfolding in its shadows. Over the next weeks, Marianne balanced cleaning shifts with night classes, her mind buzzing with balance sheets and ledgers. The work was grueling, but numbers welcomed her back like old friends, their logic a steady anchor. Tristan checked in, not as a savior but a partner, sharing coffee breaks where they talked. Not of love, not yet, but of dreams, fears, and the world they wanted to build. He'd bring her tea, steaming in a paper cup, and listen as she spoke of equations, her shyness giving way to quiet confidence. One evening, after a class, she caught him waiting outside the community center, his blonde hair damp from a light drizzle. "Heard you aced your first quiz," he said, his grin boyish, proud. She laughed, a sound lighter than she'd thought possible. "I didn't fail. That's something." Her hazel eyes sparkled, the weight of her doubts lifting, if only for a moment. "It's everything," he said, handing her a cup of tea, their fingers brushing. The spark from that rainy kiss flared, softer now, steadier. They sat on a bench, the city humming around them, and talked until the streetlights flickered on. Marianne felt it then, a shift, not just in her future, but in her heart. She wasn't running anymore. She was beginning. Tristan watched her, his own heart racing, not from the chill, but from the woman beside him. Her courage, her quiet fire, mirrored his own drive to make MedBrite more than a company, a force for good. He didn't push, didn't name the love that grew in their silences, but he felt it, steady as the tea's warmth in his hands. Marianne's classes were a bridge, her work at MedBrite's outreach program a step toward a life she'd never dared imagine. Yet, as they parted, her purse heavy with textbooks, she wondered, could she truly belong in his world? Or was this a dream too fragile to hold? The city's lights glittered, a promise of answers yet to come, and Marianne walked home, her steps surer, her heart open to the possibility of light. Chapter 6. A Home in the Heart. The late spring air wove a gentle warmth through the courtyard of MedBrite's newly opened Hope Haven Community Clinic, where balloons bobbed above folding chairs and children darted between tables laden with lemonade and cookies. Marianne Harper, now 27, stood near the entrance, her long black hair catching the sunlight, her crisp blouse a far cry from the frayed sweater of a year ago. Her hazel eyes, once shadowed by exhaustion, sparkled with nervous awe. Her name badge, Marianne Harper, Outreach Coordinator, a quiet testament to her transformation. A year ago, she'd been a cleaner, too poor to afford a doctor. Now, she welcomed families who mirrored her past, their faces etched with hope and hesitation. Her accounting classes thrived, her grades a steady climb, and her work with MedBrite gave her purpose, a voice for those the system often overlooked. Yet, as she smoothed her skirt, her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of standing in a moment she'd never dared imagine. Tristan Langley's rainy kiss, his unwavering belief, anchored her. Their bond deepened through months of shared teas and late-night talks. Still, a flutter of doubt lingered. Could she truly belong in this world? Tristan stood at the podium, his blonde hair glinting, his rolled-up sleeves revealing an ease that belied his role as MedBrite's visionary. At 32, he was a man comfortable in his purpose, his blue eyes sweeping the crowd with humble pride. The clinic was his dream realized, a place where care met dignity, where no one was turned away. As he stepped to the microphone, the crowd hushed, their faces a mosaic of anticipation. "Good evening," he began, his voice clear, steady. "We built this clinic to heal not just bodies, but souls. It lives not in walls or charts, but in people. People who give everything." His gaze found Marianne, a soft intensity in his eyes that made her breath catch. One woman, who once doubted her worth, now holds the hands of others. She didn't walk into my life as a patient, but as a mirror, showing me why we fight for this. The crowd stirred, heads turning to Marianne, who flushed, her heart pounding. Tristan stepped down, no fanfare, and took her hand, his touch warm, grounding. "I'm not speaking as a founder," he said, his voice low, meant for her alone. "I'm just a man who's watched you become who you were always meant to be. You believed in others, Marianne. Believe in yourself." Tears pricked her eyes, not from shame, but from a deep, unshakable belonging. She squeezed his hand, nodding, words too heavy to speak. The crowd applauded as the ribbon fell, the clinic doors opening to laughter and chatter. But Marianne felt suspended, as if the world had paused to let this moment breathe. Tristan's hand in hers was a promise kept, not of rescue, but of partnership, of rising together. As the sun dipped, casting golden light across the courtyard, Marianne and Tristan slipped away from the celebration. They walked down a familiar street, past faded murals and small shops, until they reached the corner store where Marianne had once worked a second job, bagging groceries to make ends meet. The neon sign flickered, its hum a nostalgic echo. Marianne stopped, her purse light against her hip, and pulled out a crumpled payslip, yellowed from her first cleaning shift years ago. She held it up, the ink faded but the memory sharp. "I kept this," she said, her voice soft, a smile tugging at her lips. "It was proof I could keep going even when I had nothing. When Clara was sick, when I thought I'd break, this reminded me I didn't." Tristan took the paper, his fingers brushing hers, holding it like something sacred. "You didn't just keep going," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "You changed me, Marianne. That night in the rain, your strength, your heart, it made me want to be better, to build something real." His voice was low, fervent, his blue eyes reflecting the dusk's soft glow. Marianne laughed, the sound bright, unguarded. "I thought I'd always be the background, the one who cleans up after everyone else's story. But you saw me, Tristan. You made me believe I could be more." Her hazel eyes danced, the weight of her past lifting like mist. "You already were," he replied, his tone steady, a grin breaking through. "I just got lucky enough to notice." He stepped closer, the street's hum fading, the world narrowing to them. "So," he said, his voice teasing, "should we buy something? I owe you a real dinner." "Only if I keep the receipt," she teased back, her smile bold, no longer shy. They stepped into the store, past the checkout where her past lingered, its aisles holding no grand romance but something better. Honesty, memory, the quiet beauty of ordinary things, made extraordinary by love. Marianne felt it in the brush of Tristan's shoulder, the ease of their laughter as they picked out ingredients for a meal. Neither had planned, but both craved. A simple pasta, a bottle of cheap wine, a shared future. Outside, the evening air was cool, the city alive with distant horns and soft lights. They walked hand in hand, their steps unhurried, the payslip tucked safely in Marianne's purse. She thought of the vitamins, the scholarship, the clinic, small acts that had rebuilt her, not because Tristan saved her, but because he believed she could save herself. And she had. Her classes would lead to a degree, her work at the clinic would touch lives, and her love for Tristan would pave a future neither faced alone. The hospital loomed in the distance, its lights a beacon of their beginning. But Marianne no longer saw it as a cage. It was where she'd been seen, where she'd begun to shine. Tristan glanced at her, his profile soft in the dusk, and Marianne felt certainty settle in her bones. She wasn't the cleaner anymore, nor the millionaire's muse. She was Marianne Harper, a woman who'd walked through shadows and emerged whole, not because of love, but alongside it. His hand tightened around hers, a silent vow, and she smiled, bold and bright, claiming her place in her own story. The stars above whispered of promises kept, of love that didn't need to shout to be true. Here, in this quiet moment, they were enough. Two souls, seen and cherished, walking forward together. Closing remarks. Thank you, dear listeners, for walking with Marianne and Tristan through the tender, rain-soaked paths of kindred hearts in the rain. Their story reminds us that love and kindness can bloom in the quietest moments, lighting even the darkest nights. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What moved you most? Did a moment spark a memory of your own? Share your reflections in the comments and rate this tale from 0 to 10. Your voice weaves our community closer. A heartfelt thank you for joining us, for letting this story cradle you before sleep. Subscribe and hit the bell to catch our next tale, where new hearts connect under starlit skies. Until then, keep spreading kindness and we'll meet again soon. Sweet dreams.